When I was about 6 or 7 years old, my family embarked on a summer vacation to a remote island in Maine. We rented an old house right by the water. This island was incredibly eerie. The house itself was filled with antique furniture, likely dating back more than 60 years. We had no television, and the only source of water was a well with an old-fashioned pump. The house was adorned with hundreds of books and photographs, some of which appeared to be from a bygone era. To add to the eerie atmosphere, there was an unsettling rat infestation in the backyard. These rodents scurried around at night, making it even more unnerving. What made it all the more bizarre was the island's inhabitants. Apart from a man named Bubba, who was in his mid-40s and worked as a fisherman, everyone else on the island was over 60 years old. Whenever we prepared dinner, a group of elderly ladies from neighboring houses seemed to know and would show up with freshly baked blueberry pie and freshly caught bluefish. It was as if they were keeping a close eye on us, knowing our every move. The truly eerie part of our stay, however, came at night. A few nights into our vacation, my parents began hearing strange singing that would start and stop for about 20 to 30 minutes. Initially, they didn't pay it much attention, but as the nights went on, the singing continued, and it piqued our curiosity. We decided to venture outside one night to uncover the source. The eerie chorus sounded like a choir of children, and we were all both fascinated and disturbed. We searched for the origin of the singing but found nothing. It was an unsettling mystery that cast a strange shadow over our trip. The following day, my dad stumbled upon an old scrapbook in the house's library, dating back to the early 1920s. The house we were staying in had once been an old schoolhouse, and there, in the scrapbook, was a photograph of the boys' corps. It sent shivers down our spines, and we decided to cut our trip short, leaving the next day. The island's enigmatic history and the inexplicable singing left an indelible mark on our memories. The house I lived in before my current one was undeniably haunted, though we never laid eyes on any apparitions. When we first moved in, we were renovating the kitchen and master bedroom. My then-husband would leave for work, leaving me alone in this house with no furniture, no flooring, and not much to do. I can't quite explain it, but when I was alone in that bedroom at night, I felt an overwhelming, bone-chilling fear. I couldn't bear to stay in that room, so I bolted out of the house at 4 a.m. after he left for work and slept in my car with my dog until daylight. That was just the beginning of our eerie experiences. A week or so later, the house was finally finished, and we moved all the furniture in. I began sleeping in my actual bedroom across the house. A friend and her husband moved in with us, and the guys went away for military training for 2 weeks, leaving us girls to fend for ourselves. The first night, my friend came rushing into my bedroom, asking to sleep with me because her bed was shaking. I chuckled, thinking she might have been sleepwalking, and made room for her. But no more than 5 minutes later, my bed started shaking violently, as if there was an earthquake. We stayed completely still, waiting for it to stop. The next night, the same thing happened. Night after night, our beds would shake, leaving us terrified. Her bedroom was the one where I felt that intense fear when we first moved in, and she refused to sleep in there alone. She claimed she hears something like fingernails scratching in the closet, starting from the ceiling and descending all the way to the floor. On another occasion, she went to sleep with her closet door closed and her fan off. An hour later, she woke up to find her door wide open, and the fan had been turned on. Yet another night, she was in my bathroom, and I was in my bedroom when both lights suddenly went out. We thought it might be a power outage due to the house's age. We walked down the hallway to check the circuit breakers, but everything seemed to be fine. I called my father, an electrician, for help, but he insisted there were no electrical issues. After 20 minutes of arguing with my father that we absolutely would not go back into that room, we finally mustered the courage to return to my bedroom, and the lights mysteriously came back on. One night, around Halloween of last year, we decided to set up a video camera in hopes of capturing something paranormal. We positioned it on my kitchen table, facing down the hallway toward my bedroom. The first video displayed odd shadows moving across the walls, despite no one being around. The picture would intermittently distort and become fuzzy, then clear up again. We fully charged the camera and set it to record for the next 4 hours. In the video, you can see my ex-husband and me walking down the hall, entering our bedroom, and when we switched off the light, the video abruptly stopped. The battery had drained completely after just 6 minutes of recording, despite being fully charged. The activity slowed down over time, and the entities seemed to shift from trying to scare us to playing tricks on new people who stayed overnight. Their belongings would vanish. The couch or bed they were sleeping on would shake. But strangely, my bed never shook again. It almost became a running joke among us. Although we never actually saw anything, the paranormal presence in that house was palpable. When I was a kid, I used to visit my uncle's lodge during school holidays. The lodge was nestled on a vast property, bordering the edge of thick bushland, so my brother and I always had plenty of adventures to keep us entertained. One day, while playing near an empty creek with my dog, he suddenly bolted into the trees. Everyone else had gone into town, and my dad was napping inside, leaving me mostly on my own. Worried about my dog, I decided to follow him into the woods. My dog was much faster, and I quickly lost track of him. As I wandered further into the woods, panic started to set in. Lost and frightened, I turned back in the direction I believe I had come from, hoping to return to my dad for help. But as I hurried back, I tripped over a tree root and tumbled down a steep embankment. Something struck my head, and my vision became hazy. I wasn't sure how I had ended up there, but what woke me up was the sensation of my dog licking my face. He was right beside me. I was relieved to see him, but my joy turned to fear when he started barking. It was an unfamiliar bark, a low, rumbling growl I had never heard him make before. He remained flat on his stomach while barking, which sent shivers down my spine. I turned to see what had caught his attention, and there, standing nearby, was a man. He wore a faded cowboy hat with a large chunk missing from the side. "Hey, kid, you had a pretty bad fall," he said in an incredibly deep voice. "But you should be all right. Let me get you back home." He picked me up, grabbed my hand, and we started walking back through the bush. I remember clutching his gloves, which struck me as odd because it was the middle of summer and the heat was stifling. My dog kept bumping into my leg as we walked, causing me to stumble repeatedly. Strangely, the man didn't speak again after that initial greeting. We didn't walk for long because we reached the creek bed quickly, and I heard my dad calling my name for dinner. Excited to be heading home, I started running toward the house. But just before I got there, I realized I hadn't thanked the man for his help. I turned to shout, "Thanks, mister," but to my surprise, he had vanished. I figured he must have been in a hurry or something. A few days later, I was at the local supermarket with my mom, a small-town shop where everyone knew everyone else. As I wandered around, I noticed a photograph hanging on the wall. It was a picture of a man wearing a cowboy hat, the same hat with a missing chunk from the side. It was the man who had helped me in the woods. I wanted to thank him properly, so I asked one of the store's employees who he was. As it turned out, he had been the original owner of the store around 30 years ago, but met with a tragic accident in the woods where my dog and I had been. Back in the day, he used to grow vegetables for the store himself, right in the heart of those woods. Apparently, he had gone to check on his crops one fateful day when a severe storm rolled in. Desperate to get back, he attempted to climb up from a gully where his dog had fallen, and a branch broke off a tree, striking him and breaking his back. They didn't find him until weeks later. His loyal dog had stayed by his side, but eventually succumbed to starvation. During my high school days, the drama department decided to set up a haunted house for Halloween. It was your typical spooky affair, with the usual jump scares and eerie props. However, There was one particular element that, in hindsight, was more unsettling than we had anticipated. In a recent play, the drama department had used a cable hanging from the stage ceiling, complete with a harness. This cable was originally intended for a scene involving a hanging, so it had a fake noose attached to it. The noose wasn't functional in the sense that it didn't tighten when you put weight on it, but it also didn't have any give. Meaning, once you hung from it, the noose would dangle loosely around your neck. Looking back, it was a rather foolish setup. Naturally, this peculiar contraption found its way into our haunted house. I volunteered to play the part of a hanging trick-or-treater, dressed in a dinosaur costume with a mask, clutching a bag of candy, and pretending to be a lifeless decoration. At one point, I decided to take a break from my hanging duties. The harness had been riding up in some uncomfortable places, and I needed a breather. During my absence, a couple of mischievous individuals thought it would be fun to grab the noose and swing around the stage from it. This unintended stunt somehow tightened the noose without my knowledge. Upon my return, I donned my mask, climbed a ladder, secured the harness, placed the noose around my neck, and allowed myself to dangle. However, this time was different. The noose unexpectedly tightened around my throat, cutting off both my circulation and air supply. Almost immediately, I started to drift into unconsciousness, slowly falling asleep in a strange, macabre lullaby. It was only after a few seconds that the gravity of the situation hit me. I suddenly realized I was hanging there, choking and struggling for my life. Panic set in, and I blindly reached out for the ladder, managing to pull myself to safety. Gasping for breath, I removed the noose and harness, shaking with fear and relief. My head throbbed with pain, and my nerves were in shambles. I couldn't help but think about how easily I could have accidentally hanged myself that night. It was a chilling realization. I walked away from that horrifying experience, my heart still racing, knowing that I had narrowly escaped a Halloween legend in the making. Every year, as Halloween rolled around, new students would hear the legend of the drama student who had hung himself for hours in the school's haunted house, while oblivious families strolled past, thinking he was just part of the spooky decor. The legend persisted despite faculty denials, a haunting reminder of the Halloween that almost turned deadly. My godmother's close friend, whom I'll call Sarah, had a son nearly a decade ago. Sarah's father had passed away approximately a year before her son's birth. Throughout their home, there was always a photograph of her late father placed atop the television in the living room. Sarah's son, whom we'll call Max, often glanced at the photo but had never inquired about the man depicted. One day, Sarah was upstairs in their two-story house, while Max, who was just 3 or 4 years old at the time, was in the backyard, near their in-ground pool. Sarah had strictly instructed Max never to go near the pool without supervision, so she felt confident he would be safe. However, her peace was shattered when she suddenly heard a loud splash. Panic surged through her, and she raced down the stairs. As she reached the first floor, the splashing abruptly ceased. Fearing the worst, Sarah stepped onto the patio. To her immense relief, she found Max standing there, drenched but seemingly unharmed. Sarah quickly scooped up her son, drying him off, and anxiously asked him what had transpired. Max's response was simple yet bewildering. He said, "I fell into the water, but then the man from the picture on top of the TV saved me." About a year ago, I found myself lying in bed, my mind still buzzing with the vivid world of zombies from the book I had just finished. World War Z, an excellent zombie novel, by the way. It was the heart of winter, a little past midnight, and I couldn't seem to drift into slumber. My gaze was fixed upon the ceiling, thoughts of zombies refusing to let go, while my faithful dog lay snoring beside me. Then, in the midst of this eerie silence, it happened. 3 distinct thuds echoed from the glass window across the room. They were loud and unnerving, like someone forcefully pounding on the glass with the flat of their hand. Fear shot through me, and it jolted my dog awake, prompting him to start barking. I tried to reassure both of us, murmuring soothing words in the darkness, struggling to come up with a rational explanation. After a few minutes, we managed to calm down, my dog eventually returning to sleep, and I followed suit, albeit about half an hour later. I was startled from my sleep in the dead of night, the same sound assaulting my ears once more. Thump, thump, thump. It emanated from that very same window, maintaining its steady rhythm, and was as loud and disconcerting as before. My dog, roused again, joined the chorus of barking. We were both gripped by fear, and I couldn't muster the courage to turn on the lights and investigate the source of the noise. The only instinctual response I could think of was to flee. So I dashed into the living room, huddled on the couch with my dog, and draped a blanket over both of us. Morning came, and I awoke on the couch, feeling drained from a night of intermittent sleep. My dog sat by the door to my room, whining and appearing utterly alert. I returned to my bedroom and cautiously glanced out of the window. Everything seemed normal. No visible marks on the glass or anything out of the ordinary. I lived in an apartment on the top floor of a 6-story building, with a fire escape outside the window nearest to my bed, not the one where the sounds had originated. It seemed improbable that whatever had struck the window could have plummeted from such a height and produced a sound that resonated like it did. I stubbornly pushed aside my doubts, attempting to find a rational explanation for the 3 impacts, each separated by a consistent interval, on 2 separate occasions, and all occurring at night, a time when birds typically wouldn't be in flight. My best guess was that a bird must have collided with the window, but I couldn't shake the uncanny details of the experience. Slightly consoled by my rationalization, I left for work feeling more at ease for the rest of the day. That is, until a nagging suspicion crept into my thoughts as I wrapped up my tasks. I raced home, eager to confirm what I suspected. As I stood before the window, the sun dipping below the horizon, my apprehension was validated. There was an exterior screen affixed to the window. The noises had undoubtedly come from inside the room, and the reality of it sent shivers down my spine.